Good morning. My name is Sarah Barron. I have the honor of being the pastor here at First United Methodist Church of Schenectady, and the distinct privilege of leading you today as we celebrate the life of Cliff. I am a pastor with now 20 years of experience. I do not usually cry during the prelude. Like sometimes later in the service, I'm kind of a wimp, but as each of you have entered this space, I have been thinking about what an impact Cliff made in this place and how excited he would be to see you all and to see the youth group here, to see our friends from Emmanuel Friedens, to see our church, to see colleagues, to see family, to know that many of you are watching online. It is just, it's a beautiful thing. Thank you for being here. Sorry if I stole your words, Larry. We are gathered here to praise God and to witness to our faith as we celebrate the life of Cliff David, that in our pain we may find comfort, in our sorrow we may find hope, and in death, resurrection. I invite you to rise if it is comfortable for you as we sing together number 2004, so that's in the little black book, The Faith We Sing. Praise the source of faith and learning. If you are not instinctually a person who does this, you may want to pay attention to the words and see how beautifully they fit Cliff. you're welcome to be seated. I invite you to join me in the spirit of prayer. God of love, we are thankful that you are here with us today, as you are on all days. You are the one who knows all the secrets of our hearts, and you know the depth of our loss. We come together today to thank you for Cliff's life and to seek your comfort and strength in facing the world without him. We ask that your comforting presence be felt with all those who are grieving with us today. We ask that you help us open ourselves to you in this time, so that our hearts may be opened again to love and healing. Having gathered in this place with broken and yet grateful hearts, we offer them to you. Amen. Jess, I invite you forward to read Maya Angelou, no pressure.
Good morning. We had a hard time choosing what to read today, but then I came across this poem written by Maya Angelou in honor of James Baldwin, and that felt appropriate. Great souls die, and our reality bound to them takes leave of us. Our souls, dependent on their nature, now shrink, wizened, our minds formed and informed by their radiance, fall away. We are not so much maddened as reduced to the unutterable ignorance of dark, cold caves. And when great souls die, after a period, peace blooms. Slowly and always irregularly, spaces fill with a kind of soothing electric vibration. Our senses restored, never to be the same, whisper to us, they existed. They existed. We can be and be better, for they existed.
Thank you for making me not the only one. We also had trouble picking scripture. There's a lot of good choices out there. We went with a very short one, that's first, Romans 8:38 to 39. I will admit, as a clergy person, if you don't know much scripture, this would be one of the things to hold. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, nor angels nor rulers, nor things present nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. And a slightly longer passage from Ecclesiastes 3. We thought that this both encompassed Cliff's life and his ability to know when it was time to show up or to leave, including even at the end of his life. For everything there is a season, and for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to throw away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace, What gain have workers from their toil? I have seen the business that God has given to everyone to be busy with. God has made everything suitable for its time. Moreover, God has put a sense of past and future into their minds, yet they cannot figure out what God has done from the beginning to the end. I know that there is nothing better for them than to be happy and enjoy themselves as long as they live. Moreover, it is God's gift that all should eat and drink and take pleasure in all their toil. I know that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nothing can be taken from it. God has done this so that all can stand in awe before the Holy One. It is one of my most deeply held beliefs that in every human life we have the chance to catch a unique glimpse of the divine spirit. That each of us reflects God in unique ways and can teach others about God. And it is truly rare that a view of God is just so fun. I am guessing that you all met Cliff, so you already know he liked to talk. To humans? Most humans? Maybe all humans, we're not sure. He loved to talk for hours and hours until suddenly he was done and he left. And yet somehow those hours flew by because he was so fun and interesting, and he made the time flow seamlessly. And Cliff loved music. Loved it so much that sometimes he would, at home, listen to music and look out at nature and just be, savoring the goodness. Which, I want to note, is really funny because he did that without talking. He also loved going to concerts and dancing to the music in this sanctuary and just enjoying music, which I was reminded this week is dancing air. Cliff loved people. He loved his family. He loved his friends. He loved his students. He loved his church. He loved those he volunteered with. He loved his youth group. People got into his heart pretty easily, but then stayed there for the rest of his life. Even though he hasn't lived down south in decades, he had oodles of people he visited whenever he went home. Cliff loved helping people. There are innumerable students and family and friends that he cared for over the years, in addition to all the ones that he helped through the more formal avenues of church and service. His niece Sheila was always at the top of his list. He spent his life and even his death planning, making sure that she would be well cared for, because she is not a person who is able to do so herself. Cliff loved food, but we're going to be honest here for a minute. He loved some food. He was unbelievably persnickety about food. I think he enjoyed sending food back to the kitchen at various restaurants and establishments for a variety of reasons that other people could not predict. I think he made them up. He pretended he had slippers. Cliff loved to play. He brought play into even the most serious of conversations and moments, and that eased the way through those conversations and moments. He took people very seriously, but he did so playfully, and the result then was beautiful. In his core, I'm stealing this one from Larry, sorry Larry. Cliff was just decisively good. He was opinionated, really, really opinionated, which also means he made decisions easily, but the decisions were always for good. He had these instincts for good that were just perfectly tuned. He knew if he wanted to go on a mission trip, or serve on a board, or offer his insights, and he knew that quickly. He knew when he wanted to arrive and when he wanted to leave, and even though he could talk for hours, he wasn't one to linger once he was done. Cliff was, of course, a teacher. To his core, he was a teacher who loved his students and coworkers most of all, which I believe is the best kind of teacher. In all my years here, Cliff was head usher. He once pretended not to be for a minute, but nobody believed him. He was gracious and kind, thoughtful and thorough. He usually came in on Saturdays just to make sure everything was in place for Sunday. It took me years to figure that out. As Jess and Larry and I talked, we realized how many of those kinds of little things he would do, the things that people didn't know, the ways in other places he showed up on Saturday to prepare the things. This humble service that just made people's lives easier. There were just so many places that he worked and so many lives he touched. And he somehow had that energy around him because Cliff, more than anyone else I know, gave off clergy vibes. People stopped him in airports to ask him to pray for them. People regularly thought he was a bishop. I once stood next to him in the hallway out there in a collar, and people thought he was the pastor here. My theory is that his love for people exuded from him so well that people couldn't help but associate him with Jesus. So, to my original point, Cliff as a lens to see God. It's pretty great, right? A God who loves to talk to us. A God always willing to dance and play with us. God is one who savors the goodness of life, but with fairly high standards. God who is good and works for good and spends energy caring for people. God whose love shines through. Pretty nice view of God, isn't it? I am so glad that I knew Cliff and I got to see God in him and through him. I am so grateful for his life. Thanks be to God. Amen. We have another hymn during which I can attempt to pull myself together. This one is in the red hymnal number 707, Hymn of Promise. I invite you to rise if it's comfortable for you. The next thing in this service is a time of silent prayer. And I just want to give you some options of how to use that time because sometimes our society isn't really used to giving us time. It may be that you want to pray for those who are particularly grieving for Cliff. It may be that it is a good time for you to say goodbye and thank you. It may also be that this is a good time to let the memories of Cliff stir in you so that when we come to the time of sharing, you will have something ready. Will you pray with me? Amen. I'm going to invite Larry up to start the time to share.
Thank you, Pastor Sarah. Thank you, friends and family, for coming out to honor Cliff, as you know him. I know him as Uncle Clifford, or Uncle Cliff, or Uncle CD, actually. I thank Pastor Sarah for interceding with some of the things that we had discussed and I looked to speak about. There's so many things, so many stories that I want to tell. So many beginnings of speeches and presentations that I'd prepared, scrapped, prepared, scrapped, prepared, and scrapped. So I'm just gonna speak to you about a few things from the heart, one of which, the primary theme that I found that really resonated with my Uncle CD's life was a life of service. I came across I don't know if it's a poem or a quip, about 4 weeks ago, and I was preparing this speech for a Toastmasters meeting. And it was based in this quip that said, smell the flowers and blow out the candles. And as I was Googling the meaning of this quip or poem, it kind of varied in what it meant, so I had to determine what it meant to me, that I would need to carry this forward in any kind of presentation. And the base was going to be in something completely different. Smell the flowers, blow out the candles. But one of the interpretations that I found in this smell the flowers and then blow out the candles, smell the flowers was the ability to take the time while you have the time to be with people that you care about, meet more of them, be in the moment, be here and now, and that's very, very difficult these days. So I also thank Pastor Sarah for giving us that time of reflection, a moment of prayer, a moment to be still, be here, be now. Now, on the blow out the candles, know when a season, a time, or a chapter has passed. It's closed. It is done. It is time to move forward. Now back to his life of service, because this ties back with the smell the flowers and blow out the candles. He had many seasons of life where he smelled the flowers in different ways. I mentioned that he spent a life of service and he was a veteran. Not going all the way back to his childhood, I wasn't there for that. I actually wasn't there for his veteran years, but those really connected with me because we came from a family of veterans. His father was a veteran, his brother is a veteran, he's a veteran, I'm a veteran. A great deal of his direct family members and indirect were veterans. His first adult chapter was in the service of his country, serving his fellow countrymen through service in the United States military. And he embodied very well the Navy's core values, which were courage, commitment, and respect. For me in the Air Force, it was integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all that you do. Now, I know you guys are living that kind of life, but particularly for the young people who knew him, hang on to those core values. I'm just going to give you the ones that were most familiar with me. Integrity first, do the right thing. Service before self. And when I say service, serve us. Not self-directed, but serve your fellow mankind. Serve the citizens of your country, the citizens of your community, residents. Extend yourself and your gifts. And in excellence in all that you do. Put your best foot forward. He always did that. He started with the United States Navy. But then he went a whole nother season and smelled a whole nother set of flowers internationally as he was in the Peace Corps. I didn't know that chapter of his life until very recently. So some of those pictures in the sling and the hammock that I love, Peace Corps days. Went from service of the country to service internationally of the world. But even in that time frame and definitely following, he went to service of his community through education. And not just the formal education of college and university, but of young people in communities, on boards, in his family. He served us. He served us extensively well. He gave of himself extensively and without the expectation of return. And he spent his last chapters here, well, a long last chapter, but his last chapters here serving in the community in a varied of ways, and all these ways of which I know that you guys are going to remember, whether you make it to this microphone, you make it to comments in YouTube, or not, or just conversation. He continued to serve all the way to the end. Why do I bring up the service, and how does that tie back to smelling of flowers and blowing out candles? A life of service spent in serving all of us in all of our capacities and all our needs through all of his ability. He passed on Veterans Day. He passed on a day recognizing the service to the country and to the world. And he passed on his own accords, of his own means. That very morning of Veterans Day, we got a phone call. Jess and I were preparing to go have breakfast, Veterans Day breakfast, and we got a phone call from his skilled nursing facility. We got one phone call, first one at 8 o'clock, and it was like, hey, we're gonna have a change of leadership. We want to send you a mailer to let you know of the change of leadership. I'm thinking, okay, it doesn't require a phone call, just send the mailer. Thank you very much, hang up. The second phone call came 7 minutes later, which involved his physician and the nurse practitioner, and that was 7 minutes after the mailer, and said, it's time for us to start comfort care. We need your authorization. I wanted to honor his wishes, and these were in his wishes, but it was hard to give the sign off, but I had to do my part in the service and duty to honor him, so I gave that sign off. We went to breakfast, we came back, we had plenty of conversations, we knew the time draws nigh. Then at the end of the day, would be a normal work day, but it was a holiday, 5:45 p.m., we get the final phone call that he had passed. And I'm thinking, what a Veterans Day. Now, one of the things that made that beautiful to me is that they never made it comfort care. He checked out of his service to us in this life on his own terms, on his own accord. He knew throughout life, with you, with me, with all of us, and a great many folks that are not with us anymore, to stop and smell the flowers, making trips down to South Carolina from here in the wintertime, and in the summertime, and complaining the whole time. But enjoying every minute with everyone. Down there with us, some of the slides you saw was him going with me some years back to Germany to go spend time with my family over there. And we took a day trip over to Sweden and I believe it was Denmark. We froze. I really found out how persnickety he was about food in that moment. But he took the time to smell the flowers in each season with each community and really bring that in and hopefully left seeds behind for the rest of us to plant, to continue to grow, even after the smelling of the flowers. But now, just like for any person's living, there's times to blow out the candles, not blow out other people's candles. Keep your breath on your candle. Know when to close the chapters in your life. He knew when to do that, as we talked about. He liked to have long conversations, but he knew when to cut them off and walk away. Our last long conversation, April 22nd, 2023, lasted 3 hours, 36 minutes, and 51 seconds. I took a screenshot of that, not knowing what chapter was closing in that particular moment, but you knew when you talked to my uncle that you need to have time. You need time to smell those flowers, but when it was time to blow out that candle in that conversation or transition, it's time. So now it's time to blow out the candles on the life of Mr. Clifford D. Davis and move into the next chapter with joy that we had the opportunity, the blessing, to actually be able to spend time and make community with him. Thank you.
Most of you know me as Sylvester Sly. I'm one of the lay leaders here at First United Methodist. First, on behalf of the First United Methodist of Schenectady, I offer our condolence to you as family. Cliff joined First United Methodist on December 14th. I can do this. I can do this. All right. Cliff joined First United Methodist on December 14th, 1997. He passed away on November the 11th, 2024. Cliff's services here at the First United Methodist Schenectady included the Adult Education Committee. He served as a communion steward. He was part of the handbell choir. He was also did coffee and fellowship after service. He was part of the breakfast board. He was on the columbarium committee. He was a trustee. He was a head usher, children and youth ministries, youth group leader, steward, welcoming ministry team, and staff pastor parish relationship committee. On behalf of First United Methodist, we want to thank you as family for having Cliff. On a personal note, it gets better. On a personal note, I had the pleasure of knowing him as a very dear friend. I've heard people describe him as unique, and we share the same doctor, and the other day I saw his doctor, and his doctor described him as having a dry sense of humor, drier than what his was. And so that says a lot. He's been described as being a perfect gentleman and other wonderful rare qualities. He was all of this and more. He was also a very private person, and you only knew what he wanted you to know. I can remember when we heard that he was in the Navy. We were on a mission trip, and he mentioned he was in the Navy. Myself, as well as the kids, all were shocked. We kind of like, Navy, and I guess given his size and everything, you just wouldn't expect it, you know, but he was in the Navy. The youth loved him and flocked to him. And often you'd see him during service or on mission trips in conversation with him. And at the end, you'd hear him say, "Don't forget what I said." And he'd give you that devilish smile of his, where he would kind of tilt his head and look at him one-sidedly. So, Cliff agreed to co-lead the youth group after the youth asked him and said they felt he would be fun to hang with. Cliff then asked me what it was he had to do, because he had heard that they painted, they hung insulation, they put up drywall and all that good stuff. Cliff, these are his very words: "I don't do manual labor, but I can supervise." So he made it clear that if he was going to do it, he would supervise. That was it. He wasn't going to do manual labor. Occasionally the youth would get him to pitch in about 2 seconds. Then, as you say, he was the one, when it was over, he'd end it. You'd look up and Cliff had gone somewhere else, either sitting and talking with folks or just kind of watching. Cliff had a way of making you feel at ease and relaxed when you were around him. Even after he went into assisted living, he continued to have this ability with the people that he was in assisted living with. You would go, usually if you went in to visit, there was always a group of people talking to him, or he was going to tell you about a group of people that he was talking to. One of the things, couple of things. Cliff was very self-spoken. A couple of stories, and I'm going to end it before I go. I had never heard Cliff raise his voice till on a mission trip, and we were headed to Kentucky. It was late, it was raining, we were way due past where we should have been. They were expecting us at 7. We were still on the road at 10. We made a wrong turn. Backing up, I was driving. The space was tiny, and there was a ditch on one side, and I guess what you might consider a level wall, whatever, but to maneuver it was tiny. All of a sudden from the back seat, I hear the youth, "You're gonna back into the ditch, you're gonna back into the ditch, look out, look out, look out." And from the seat next to me, I hear Cliff go, "Keep quiet or you're gonna make him go into the ditch." That was the only time I heard him raise his voice. A friend of mine who was there sent me a video of a visit she did with him in the nursing home, which was hilarious. Cliff is sitting properly, eating whatever it was he was eating, and she asked, "Whose clothes do you have on?" And he looked at her, and he made the comment, I think he said, "They're kind of big." So she says, "Are they Sylvester's clothes?" And out of Cliff's mouth comes, "He's big." And so they continue. Her response is, "Yeah, he's a big person, isn't he?" Cliff goes, "Mm-hmm," like he would usually do. In the end, I don't know how the conversation got to my shoes. But Cliff asked, "Have you seen his shoes?" And in the video, you see him going. And I think that is the way I'm going to always remember Cliff. I mean, sense of humor, quiet, but when he made you laugh, he made you laugh. When he was serious, he was serious. And as everyone said, when he ended and he didn't want to have any more, he didn't have any more. We're going to miss him.
Chet and Nancy, do you want to come up next?
You wonder what we were talking about. We were debating who's going to go first. Good morning, everyone. I am Chester Burton. Most know me as Chet. I was Dean of the School of Business at SUNY Cobleskill. And I just want to give you a glimpse into what who Cliff was as a professional. I first met Cliff when he joined the faculty in 1987. Actually, I remember the ride home from the airport. Nancy and I picked him up, bring him to his interview, and we hit it off with Cliff immediately. He was the ultimate department chair, professor, and colleague. I could always count on Cliff when there was a new initiative. For example, when Saturday College started, Cliff was one of the first to step up and condense a week's worth of course content into 4 hours. When entrepreneurship was introduced as a certificate program within the business curriculum, Cliff made it happen. When core assessment outcomes for the School of Business were being established, Cliff volunteered to be on the development committee. These are just a few of the examples. Needless to say, Cliff's support made my job as a dean much easier. He was a consummate professional and a dear friend. Cliff was also actively involved in United University Professors, which is the State University of New York's union. He was not only a leader at the Cobleskill chapter, serving as president and vice president, but also statewide, university-wide, serving as SUNY Cobleskill's statewide delegate, and as a member of the Veterans Affairs Committee. After retirement from SUNY Cobleskill in 2013, Cliff continued his UUP involvement, serving as officer for retirees. Cliff was a beloved friend to all of those he came into contact with. More often than not, no matter where we were in the university setting, someone knew Cliff. He will be missed by all of us. He touched so many of our hearts and lives.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nancy Burton. I am very, very saddened to stand before you today to talk about our dear friend Cliff. I was a colleague and close friend, very close friend of Cliff since he arrived at SUNY Cobleskill's campus. We were both professors in the Department of Business. Cliff was known for his intellect, his wit, and unwavering integrity. His support and kindness could always be counted on, always. And as my husband just mentioned, when Cliff had applied for the position at SUNY Cobleskill, Chet and I went to the airport to pick him up. And we immediately made this connection, immediately. So driving back to Cobleskill, we had a lot of conversation, and we really got to know Cliff. And then from that point on, we did things together socially, and I don't know if Chet mentioned this, but everywhere we went, people seemed to know him. I know you said that too, Sarah. At the airport, someone would come up and say, "Aren't you Cliff Davis?" And we're like astounded. But anyway, some of you have already spoken and addressed his interest in music. I have some of this here, and I will tell you parts of it. Cliff loved music, especially classical music and opera. In the summer, we would go to Saratoga Performing Arts Center to hear the Philadelphia Orchestra. We would go to Tanglewood to hear the Boston Symphony. We would go to Cooperstown Glimmer Glass Festival to see the operas. I mean, Cliff was so talented. He could actually sing the arias for many of the operas. Like one time I was looking over and I said, "What's he doing?" And he's singing. And this is in Italian, okay? But he still like knew the words and he was going on. And I don't know if many of you knew that. But he's wonderful. He's just very talented. Cliff was also very social. He loved a good party. Loved a good party. And he was a very good dancer. I don't know if you knew that, okay. But at any rate, he was a man of many interests and the finest friend you could ever ask for. He will be greatly missed. Thank you.
I think it was while Cliff was on trustees that we put the dark parts on so you could see them. Those were the people that I knew had prepared remarks, but the space is open for anyone who wishes to share. There's one rule, only one, but the rule is that you need to speak into a microphone. 2 reasons for that. 1, you never know who can't hear well, and 2, we are recording for the family and friends that weren't able to be here, and they only hear what goes through the sound system. So if you are able to come up here, this is a really sturdy place to talk or cry, as pretty much all of us have evidenced. Or if you are not able to get up here, Zach is standing there with a handheld microphone. Is there anybody who wishes to speak? Maybe those of us who spoke already covered it all? I kind of don't believe it. Okay.
Yes, I've danced with Cliff here in the aisle, and I counted him as one of my boyfriends. Unfortunately, he had so many girlfriends. He was just such a lovely man, so much fun. Yeah, we've missed him for a long time now, since he hasn't been able to come to church.
Cliff was comfortable. If you didn't know him very well, as I didn't when I first came here, I just sat down beside him one day and he told me all kinds of stories, wonderful stories. But one thing I want to say about him is that a few years ago I broke my foot and I was playing in the bell choir, and the bell choir was rehearsing up a lot of stairs, and I had to use a knee scooter. So every week for rehearsal, Cliff would meet me at the back door. He said he didn't do manual labor. Every week he carried my knee scooter all the way up to the practice room and at the end down again so I could hop on it again and go home.
Cliff was an amazing hugger. I am perpetually late to church. And so he was often the first person that I saw when I walked through the door. And his hugs were amazing. He also saw you. There are so many people who look at you and don't really look into your soul. And Cliff had that ability to just see who you were and love you for it. Just a couple, we used to have a very wonderful communion service after church was finished. There were a few of us up front, and it was very informal, and it was just a wonderful little community of people. And Cliff always would join us, but as was his wont, he was often doing something around to, benefit the church community. And I could just remember standing up on the altar going, Cliff, Cliff. And then somebody would often run and find him because we couldn't have communion without Cliff. The clergy piece, first of all, I think it was the way he held himself. He held himself regally to, probably some of that was his military background, but whatever. One of the stories he told me, I could do you one better, Sarah. He was down in South America, and somebody thought he was the Pope. Okay. Every time I walk into this church, I miss Cliff. Obviously, he's been gone for a while, and his absence is almost palpable. I will always miss him. I will always remember him as Pope Clifford.
I'm going to tell a story about Cliff. Put your earmuffs on, Jan. We were away on a youth trip, and I said, Cliff, I got to go to the store. Is there anything you need? He said, I need a six-pack of Molson's. I said, Cliff, we're on a youth trip. I can't buy beer. I got to turn in a receipt. He said, get a separate receipt. I looked at Sylvester, and I said, Jesus, what are we going to do? He goes, get the beer. So we get the beer, and we get home, and we're all playing a game, and there's Cliff in a silk robe, just sitting, drinking his Molson's. And I got a picture of it. I wish I'd given it to you, because you just could not believe the picture of this. And I'm thinking, I cannot, and we can't tell anybody, because he only drank 2 of them the whole time we were there, but he enjoyed that beer, and he enjoyed more challenging me to get that beer. So.
So many common themes that are coming up as we talk and honor Cliff. I have the pleasure of currently being a communion steward for this church, and Cliff is the one that trained me. He showed me the ropes and roped me in, and so I'm grateful for that experience and that connectedness with him. Cliff was one of my guys. I came to this church about 12 years ago, and have met some amazing people. But there are a handful of men in this church that have been instrumental in my growth as a Christian and as a person. And Cliff has been one of those. When I think and remember Cliff in the days to come, I will remember that he, as folks have said, was a lover of food, He particularly enjoyed Miss Lois Isles' brownies with deep affection. He also really liked fruitcake, which, yeah, yeah, not many folks. And I said to Cliff one time, I said, God, fruitcake, not many people like fruitcake. And he said, well, the problem is that it's sick. And I said, okay. I said, well, what do you do about that? And he says, you have to make it better. It needs medicine. And I said, okay. And he said, I said, Cliff, well, I was trying to find you fruitcake, but, it's coming up short, and I'm not finding any. He wanted something homemade, and I don't do that. And he said, but it takes about a week or two. And I said, a week or two? Yes, it needs liquor. It needs liquor to be soaked in for a week or two. It needs its medicine. I said, Cliff, I didn't expect that from you, sir, but I so appreciate it. And I will always appreciate his laughter and his dapperness and just the enormous, soft-spoken, wonderful person that he was.
I probably know him the least out of the youth group, but with the short time I've spent with him, he was really an overall great person to be around, and I hope that his contributions to this world will last a lot longer. That's pretty much it, yeah.
I also didn't know Cliff as well as probably a lot of people here. My son was a part of the youth group, but the first time I brought my son to here for, I think it was, they were making food on Sunday for the less fortunate. And growing up working in restaurants and bars when I was younger, Cliff was the ultimate host. He was the front of the house guy. He introduced himself to me when I came here. He made me feel so welcomed. And I used to look forward so much to when I would drop my son off or pick him up. Our chats, we would talk about food. He was very dapper. Just from my Jewish upbringing, as I'm hearing people talk about him, he was, to me, the ultimate mensch. He was a mensch to the fullest definition of that word, if you know it. And it's rare you meet people like that you instantly have a real connection with, and they're listening to you, his energy always left me feeling so good. And I'm gonna miss that very much. Thank you.
Zach, while you go over, I'm going to respond to Michelle. He did give great hugs, and sometimes on Sunday morning, I would be kind of, I mean, I still do that. And sometimes in that energy, I would not stop and greet Cliff and give him a hug. And oh my goodness, the pouts I got. Until I remedied the situation.
I would have to say, in long discussions with Cliff, Nancy and I probably know you not by name because he spoke of you often. And the church was his life away from being a professor. And every time he would go on his trips or some of the events you've already described, we would be the first to hear about it when he came back to school the next day. And he would sit down in the office, and as you'd say, he'd be there for probably about an hour or two or three, and we'd hear all about it.
I think we're done, and I think he actually, if he were here, would be perfectly fine letting everyone speak, because he enjoyed that. He enjoyed hearing praise about himself, but what an honor we collectively have been able to give this incredible life. I do think you nailed it. Just immense. Succinct, that one. As the pastor, I had the honor of speaking on behalf of all of us to thank God for Cliff's life. Would you join me in the spirit of prayer? God of love, we thank you for all with which you have blessed us even to this day. For the gift of joy in days of health and strength, and for the gift of your abiding presence in days of pain and grief. We praise you for family and friends, and for the places and people that make us welcome. Today, we thank you for the life of Cliff Davis and all the ways that he gave thanks to you and made the world a brighter place. For all that Cliff has given to us to make us what we are, and for that of him which lives and grows in each of us, we give you thanks. We thank you for his conversations, his humor, his playfulness, his savoring of music and some food, his loyalty, his care, his work to make peace and bring justice, his decisive goodness, his special magic self. And most of all, we thank you for the love he shared during his life and the innumerable ways he shared it, some of which we know and most of which we will never know. May his legacy live on in those he impacted. May the love he shared keep growing in those he loved. We thank you for the life and love of Cliff, and in remembrance of him, we pray the prayer that Jesus invited us to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver I'm about to offer the benediction, and I've been trying to think about how we're going to do all this, but I'm going to offer the benediction, and then I'm going to walk down that aisle, because that's usually where I greeted Cliff at the end of a service. You are welcome to greet me on your way out if you want. You are welcome to linger for a moment. Sly, I'm going to make you walk with me. And that's the plan. So, beloveds of God, may you see God's light on the path ahead when the road you walk is dark. May you always hear, even in your hour of sorrow, the gentle singing of the lark. When times are hard, may hardness never turn your heart to stone. May you always remember when the shadows fall, you do not walk